Google stock is up over 5% today on news about its new AI model, Gemini. I'll be honest with you, this can get pretty confusing. There are a lot of different terms, LLM, generative AI, ChatGPT, GPT-4. What does it all mean? This video is going to break it down, everything you need to know about the generative AI space, especially focus on the large cap, the mega cap tech stocks. Is Google's Gemini a ChatGPT killer? Let's find out. So here's the headline. Google shares pop 5% after company announces Gemini AI model. What does it mean exactly? What is Gemini? So let's just start here with OpenAI, ChatGPT. Let's break that down. So OpenAI is a private company. Microsoft owns 49% of the business. ChatGPT is going to be the tool that you use, that you actually subscribe to, that gives you the data. I'll break that down. And then when you see something like GPT-4, that's going to be an LLM, a large language model. I'll explain. And analysts are encouraged by the progress in Google's AI, but have questions on how they're going to monetize it. We'll talk about that as well. And headlines are everywhere. This one, Google launches Gemini, the AI model it hopes that will take down GPT-4. If you follow the channel, you know that Google has been an AI first company for over a decade. It acquired a company called DeepMind all the way back in 2014. So Gemini is more than a single AI model. There's a lighter version called Gemini Nano, and there's also a Pro version. Bard is now powered by Gemini Pro. Okay, so now you've got the word Bard, you've got Gemini, you've got Gemini Pro, you've got all these different terms. So Bard would be the equivalent to a ChatGPT. Gemini is going to be the LLM like GPT-4. And that gets even more confusing because Google has another product called Vertex AI. And so you're like, what does all this mean? I'll explain that as well. So Google is saying that this will eventually be integrated into Google's search engine. And there are two things to focus on here, B2C and B2B. When we talk about enterprise AI, back in January of 2023, we made a top 10 AI stocks to buy for the next decade. All these companies were on that list. And we talked about focusing on enterprise AI. So enterprise means businesses with 1,000 or more employees. And why? Because you can scale. It's much simpler to scale to hundreds and thousands and thousands and thousands of users at a single time versus selling a subscription to, say, ChatGPT to you or me for 20, 30 bucks a month. It's much harder to make huge amounts of money with that. And we're talking about massive companies with enormous market caps, $1 trillion club. So these stocks have ripped from their lows, and there's a lot of hope that a lot of money is going to be made from these AI tools, and it's important to understand what they are and how they work together. So 3 versions of Gemini. You've got Ultra, you got Pro, and you've got Nano. Google's telling us that Gemini beat GPT-4 in 30 out of 32 benchmarks. And it can also get confusing here because you might see something and say, oh, okay, benchmark, it beats ChatGPT. It's faster than GPT-4. And you're going to assume that's the model that you can use right now, but it's not even available. This is Gemini Ultra, which isn't available till next year. But you're seeing comparisons here to the LLMs. So GPT-4, again, that's owned by OpenAI. OpenAI is the company. The LLM is GPT-4, and then the user interface that you use is going to be called ChatGPT. And then GPT 3.5 is just the older version of the large language model from OpenAI. And then you've got these other ones, Claude 2. This is going to be Anthropic, and we'll talk about that later as well. These mega cap tech companies are throwing billions of dollars at these smaller companies. And then you've got Grok 1. This is going to be Elon Musk's AI tool. I like to call it Gronk. Well, let's just focus on the left-hand side. So the Ultra, the highest version of Gemini. You can see the benchmarks, 90% here, GPT-4, slightly lower, 87.29%. Here, it's actually going to be a little bit slower, but most of these are in blue. These are going to be Gemini Ultra being faster with the exception of 2. So right now, Bard is just a chatbot. So when you think of ChatGPT, it's a chatbot. You spit in a question, you ask it a question, it's going to use the LLM and it's going to quickly give you an answer. And that answer you get from a ChatGPT or from Bard is going to be using a large language model to extract the data. And this takes enormous amounts of processing power, which is why you're seeing companies like NVDA crush it right now. These mega cap tech companies, these giants, and really everyone, it's an arms race and everybody's spending billions of dollars to try to get ahead. But right now, Bard is just a chatbot. But there's a new version of Bard coming soon that's going to be much more. Next year, Google is planning to launch a preview of Bard Advanced, and that's going to be powered by Gemini Ultra. Again, this is the most powerful and capable version of Google's large language model. So Gemini is the LLM, can accept and create images, audio, and video in addition to just text. And that makes sense when you think of Google because it owns everything from Gmail to YouTube, Google search, and more. The non-text interactions are where Gemini is really going to shine. So right now you think of ChatGPT, again, it's just going to be text. You ask it a question, you get an answer in text. We're taking this to a new level. So we've got an AI war. That's basically what it is. It's an arms race. It's an AI war. So Google Bard, which we just talked about, again, powered by Gemini as the LLM. And then you got the one that everyone knows, ChatGPT, again, owned by the company called OpenAI. And the LLM is going to be GPT 3.5 or 4. Microsoft Copilot. So that was originally called Bing AI. Copilot, essentially what's really cool about Copilot, it's focused more on enterprise, and it's going to allow it to use generative AI and integrate it into Microsoft Office. Again, we talk about enterprise, trying to scale it to enterprises. Microsoft has a huge footprint, not only with Microsoft Office. The large majority of businesses use Microsoft Office, but then of course, Microsoft Azure for public cloud services. Google, of course, does have public cloud services, but much smaller. They're number 3 behind Amazon and Microsoft. And a lot of the business for Google is going to be customer facing. So a lot of it's B2C. So us using Gmail or using Google search or watching YouTube right now. And a lot of that is ad revenue. Grok, conversational AI chatbot. This is just a competitor. It's another version, another flavor, I guess you could call it, developed by billionaire Elon Musk. And the company is XAI. And that's probably going to go public. It's raising cash. I've seen a couple different articles about raising cash for XAI. So unlike most AI chatbots, the majority of them use OpenAI's GPT for the LLM. Grok has its own LLM, and they call it Grok 1. And according to the company, of course, it can outperform GPT 3.5. Well, we're already on 4, and OpenAI is working on 5. Then you've got Ernie. Not Bert and Ernie, but Ernie. If you haven't heard of it, it stands for Enhanced Representation Through Knowledge Integration. That's a mouthful. That's developed and owned by Chinese company Baidu. They have their own LLM. That's going to be called Ernie 3.0 Titan. And that's confusing because there's also Amazon Titan. And there are many others that are being developed. There's startups, a lot of different LLMs that can be used. Let's take a minute and break it down. I'm going to take a step back, explain what some of these terms mean, and then we're going to look closer at Microsoft, Amazon, and Google. Okay, we talked about this earlier, but a quick recap. So Microsoft, largest shareholder of OpenAI, put about $13 billion into this company. Again, it's a private company. It's a startup. Microsoft owns 49% of OpenAI. And you've probably been to the website before, OpenAI. You've probably played around with it, maybe you're even a subscriber. Now, I mentioned Anthropic earlier. Amazon investing $4 billion in Anthropic and have a minority ownership position in the company. So Anthropic is the name of the company like OpenAI. And its competitive chatbot to ChatGPT is going to be called Claude 2. Now, what's interesting about that is Google also invested $2 billion in Anthropic. So Amazon and Google both make their own products essentially, and they're investing in these startups as well. Again, this is an AI arms race. And there are many others. If you look under the hood, you've got companies like NVDA and Snowflake and Salesforce. They're all investing in these different startups. So what are LLMs, large language models? They represent a class of deep learning. So we did the AI series earlier this year. We talked about the different types of AI. It's a big, complex ecosystem universe. So it's a class of deep learning architectures called transformer networks. A transformer model is a neural network that learns context and meaning by tracking relationships and sequential data like the words in a sentence. Transformers were first introduced by Google in 2017 in a paper called Attention is All You Need. So again, Google has been an AI-focused company for over a decade. So historically, AI models have been focused on perception and understanding. However, LLMs, which are trained on internet-scale data sets with hundreds of billions of parameters. This is why you need things like H100 chips. You have to process all that data very quickly. So it's taken this to new heights and has unlocked AI models' ability to generate human-like content, and we're just getting this party started. Models can read, write, code, draw, and create in incredible fashion and augment human creativity improve productivity across industries to solve the world's toughest problems. Again, the focus here as an investor, how can we monetize this? And that's really going to be that B2B enterprise. This is the training compute needed in petaflops. If you don't know what a petaflop is, Google it. It's a lot of information. But you can see that line. It's like this. And this is over the last 10 years, and it's continuing to go pretty much straight up. And of course, NVIDIA has a service called NeMo. And that's part of NVIDIA AI Foundations. It's a cloud service. So again, NVIDIA is getting more into software. It's got that full AI stack, and it's why it's way ahead of the competition. We talked about how Snowflake and NVIDIA are partnering, and NVIDIA is partnering with a lot of different businesses, allowing a plug and play model. Instead of starting over from scratch, taking something that NVIDIA has already created, subscribing to a service, and something that's plug and play and very simple to use with your own proprietary data in your organization, in your enterprise. So it's a cloud service for enterprise hyper-personalization and at-scale deployment of intelligent LLMs. And they have other services as well. So generative AI, that's the buzzword. And a lot of people get confused. They hear LLM, they hear ChatGPT, they hear generative AI. What are the differences? So LLMs, large language models, provide context and memory capabilities, while generative AI enables the production of engaging responses. Okay, that might not be completely clear. Let's look at another definition. And better yet, let's look at it this way. So the LLM that powers ChatGPT makes use of an algorithm that's trained on huge volumes of text-based data scraped from the internet and any other sources that it's fed. So that large language model algorithm can analyze the data in the context of words related to one another, creating text based on a prompt. And this is the simplest way to explain it. So OpenAI, ChatGPT is an example of generative AI. So ChatGPT is generative AI. Bard AI for Google, that's generative AI. This AI chatbot, ChatGPT, operates on the foundation of an LLM, again, GPT-4. Computer World does a good job explaining this as well. In the simplest of terms, LLMs are next word prediction engines. Now, of course, that can be powerful for us. If we want to look something up, you think of this, the future of search. But think of a business where it has all this proprietary data, and that data is not really that useful because you can't use it. Like, for example, I've made an analogy where if you've got a 1,000-page PDF and you don't want to spend, hours reading that, you can customize generative AI so that your employee can essentially ask a question and it can retrieve that data and give you an intelligent response. It's more engaging and it saves a ton of time, makes things more effective and more efficient. And this article says on Wednesday, Google released a new version of their chatbot Bard. And then you're like, wait a minute, I thought it was called Gemini. This is why it's important to understand these different terms. So it's powered by its new large language model, Gemini, and it's going to be available in English in more than 170 countries and territories, including India. Okay, so let's focus on the enterprise. Let's look at Google Cloud, Amazon Web Services, and Microsoft Azure. So I go to the website here for Google, innovate faster with enterprise-ready generative AI. So now we're not talking about the ChatGPT version, right? We're not talking about Bard. And so this is going to be called Vertex AI. Well, what does that mean exactly? Essentially, Vertex AI is a platform that offers all of Google Cloud Services AI solutions under one roof. And the intent really for that is going to be focused on enterprise. So Google will focus on B2C, focus on selling subscriptions to us, the consumer. It'll be interesting to see what the future of search looks like. Is that going to be free? You're going to have to pay like a $2 server. I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how that works. And then Google, of course, is going to be focusing on enterprise as well with Google Cloud Platform, but it is smaller than the other two. And I'll show you some data on that in a minute. So if you go on Google's website, there's a ton of information, generative AI, data science, machine learning, all the different types of AI, all the different solutions under one roof. So Microsoft's version focused on enterprise is going to be Azure OpenAI Service. And this is completely different than Copilot. Copilot's a different thing. So you might be thinking now, well, what's the difference between Copilot and ChatGPT or Azure OpenAI? Again, the Azure OpenAI is focused on enterprise. That's going to be B2B. And you can argue that Copilot is too, but it can be either because consumers can also subscribe to Microsoft Office. So Microsoft Copilot or Microsoft 365 Copilot, not to be confused with GitHub Copilot, is Microsoft's generative AI companion. And this is generally going to be used in Office, but it was built using technology from OpenAI. Again, Microsoft owns 49% of the company OpenAI. And so that's going to use GPT-4, but it also includes other LLMs and Microsoft resources. And then you have Amazon. So this is going to be, again, focused on enterprise. How can AWS, Amazon Web Services, help generative AI? I've covered this on the channel before, but Amazon Bedrock, fully managed service that offers a choice of high-performing FMs on a broad set of capabilities. Essentially, this is going to be a software as a service type subscription where it's going to leverage an existing LLM, and you can actually choose the LLM you want to use. Versus designing everything from scratch, it's going to leverage what's already there and then customize it on your data. And that's what all of these enterprise solutions are going to be like. So we've talked about Code Whisperer, that's going to make that simpler to do, and so on. But it allows you to experiment, to customize your data, and create managed agents that execute complex business tasks. So it makes generative AI come to life that's customized for your business and for its needs. And as you can imagine, this is a rabbit hole. We could spend hours on this topic. So this is a good infographic. Generative AI on the left, on the top right, Amazon Bedrock. And then you've got Amazon EC2 and you've got Code Whisperer. So here it talks about generative AI and foundation models. Now we already talked about the comparison to generative AI and LLMs. A foundation model, or FM, is essentially going to be a large language model. And if we want to get really technical, there is a difference between an LLM and an FM. The foundation model uses self-supervised learning. So if you think about AI, there are all the different types of AI we talked about earlier this year. This feature is going to be different from an LLM. And the difference really is going to be supervised and unsupervised learning. But for the intent of trying to explain in the video, essentially you're using a model, and it can be a large language model or an FM. Those terms kind of get used interchangeably, because if you really break it down, a lot of these models are technically FMs and not LLMs. So that's something to keep in mind as well, because that could confuse you at some point. But just think of it as models. There's two different types. So with Amazon Bedrock, it's going to leverage foundation models such as Anthropic, Stability AI, and more. And it's accessible through an API. So essentially you can use these different large language models, or FMs, foundation models, subscribe to Amazon Bedrock service, and make it more user-friendly, more plug and play. So Bedrock is the easiest way for customers to build and scale generative AI-based applications using FMs. Now, if you hear the term Amazon Titan, those are going to be Amazon's foundation models. So now this is going to be compared to, say, a Gemini. So you sign up for Amazon Bedrock, and you can use Amazon Titan, or you can use APIs, essentially integrate into those other LLMs. All right, great, Eric. That was a nice crash course on LLMs and generative AI. How does it relate to these stocks? What's going on? What are your thoughts? So as I mentioned several times in the video, the focus for AI, at least for me, is going to be focused on enterprise. So generative AI for enterprise that you can scale to large businesses, to sell lots of licenses to lots of customers. Now, one thing that's really important to note here is that in order to do that, you have to have a platform. Now, this is the same thing that comes up with quantum computing. I won't go down that rabbit hole on this video, but these large companies, you think of Amazon Web Services, Microsoft Azure, Google Cloud Platform, plus their ecosystems themselves. They have, all three of those companies have both B2B and B2C, huge network effects, right? And they have the ability to sell to really everybody. But for businesses to buy it on a scalable solution, enterprises, right? That's going to be cloud services. That's the simplest way. You're already working with these companies, and essentially you're just adding it on. You're bolting it onto their existing contracts and so on. It's like upselling. You're not establishing those relationships from ground zero. So I think a lot of people try to compare and say, well, OpenAI is going to be the best, and this is going to be the best, Anthropic. Those LLMs are needed. But more importantly is you're going to need some sort of foundation model to scale it out to the masses. And that's what these large companies do. And so with knowing that, you say, well, which company is going to be able to monetize this the most? I think all three of the businesses can monetize this and do well. And I think that NVIDIA, AMD is getting more in the space. I mean, you got Snowflake, and there's so many different companies that partner together, and it's a whole rabbit hole. It's a endless universe of information that we could discuss. But all of those companies, you think of a Snowflake, you think of a Databricks, you can go on and on and on. All these companies are going to partner, and they really need these public cloud services companies. So which one's the biggest? Of course, Amazon Web Services. Amazon is the king of cloud. So when you look at this is Q2 of 2023, so pretty recent. AWS has 32% market share when you think of public cloud services, the cloud market. Microsoft Azure, 22%, and Google Cloud, 11%. on the last earnings for these three companies, you kind of saw that Google Cloud underperformed and the other two did pretty well. Azure the best, Amazon a slight miss, and then Google a little bit more of a miss than the other two. And you've got Alibaba Cloud, of course, Chinese 4%, IBM 3%, Salesforce 3%, Oracle 2%, Tencent 2%. So people talk about Oracle, growing. They can certainly grow. There's tons of total addressable market, but it's 2% versus 32% for Amazon. You know about Einstein for Salesforce. All these companies are working on generative AI. It's the future. So I own these three companies, Amazon, Microsoft, and Google. I've talked about it many times, primarily for cloud services. For example, if you look at Amazon, if it were just a retail company, it didn't have AWS, I wouldn't be as interested in being a shareholder. So to recap and break it down in a quick nutshell here, Google came out with Gemini. That's going to be a large language model. That's going to compete against OpenAI's GPT-4 and many others. You've got Elon Musk in the space. There's a ton of different LLMs, but LLMs are different than generative AI. When you think of Grok, it's going to have both. It's got its own LLM. It's going to have its own customer-facing generative AI solution. So Google is going to focus both on B2C and B2B. They have the least market share in cloud, but you could argue they have a very strong position on the B2C, and there could be ways to monetize that. Analysts seem pretty skeptical, at least for now, but I think there are ways to monetize it. It is much harder, though, than if you think of the enterprise scalability and monetizing it that way. You've got Microsoft that's going to have both as well, because they've got, of course, Azure, and they're going to focus on generative AI for enterprise. And then Copilot, which is going to be a combination really of B2C and B2B. And then Amazon with Bedrock, it's mostly going to be focused on enterprise. They're really at this point, they're using AI customer facing, but not necessarily a chatbot. So Google Gemini and the chatbot being Bard. You got OpenAI and ChatGPT. Of course, Microsoft owns 49% of that. And then Amazon focused really on the enterprise with Bedrock. And then a whole mess of stuff in between there, this company investing in this company, and it's all networked together. It's an AI arms race. It's an AI war. And these three companies, one way or the other, are going to win. They're going to monetize this and make money off it if anybody is. Of course, those companies like NVDA, AMD, Intel, they're going to be needed for the data centers and that compute power to process extreme amounts of data to make these LLMs work and to make generative AI come to life. And there's a whole plethora of companies that benefit from that. We talk about Broadcom, and there's an endless list. And this is what we've talked about over the last couple of years when we think of AI. With Broadcom, you've got the fabric, and you need to improve this, and you need this to work for that. The pick and shovel type plays, right? That's why SMCI has been going off. But if you're new here, subscribe to the channel. I try to bring value. I try to bring information, education to help investors make better decisions and be better investors. Subscribe to the channel, click that bell for notifications. If this was helpful, drop me a like, drop me a comment. Have a great rest of your day. Take care.